Morning, everyone. Today I'll be reading from the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 16, verses 1 through 13. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you grieve over Saul? I have rejected him from being king over Israel. Fill your horn with oil and set out. I will send to you Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided for myself a king among his sons." And Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears of it, he will kill me." The Lord said, "Take a heifer with you and say, 'I have come to sacrifice to the Lord.' Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do, and you shall anoint for me the one who I name for you." Samuel did what the Lord commanded and came to Bethlehem. The elders of the city came to meet him trembling and said, "Do you come peacefully?" He said, "Peacefully. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice." And he sanctified Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they came, he looked on Eliab and thought, "Surely his anointed is now before the Lord." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look on his appearance or at the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord does not see as mortals see. They look on outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." Then Jesse called Amminadab and made him pass before Samuel. He said, "Neither has the Lord chosen this one." Then Jesse made Shammah pass by, and he said, "Neither has the Lord chosen this one." Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, and Samuel said to Jesse, "The Lord has not chosen any of these." Samuel said to Jesse, "Are all your sons here?" And he said, "There remains yet the youngest, but he is keeping the sheep." Then Samuel said to Jesse, "Send and bring him, for we will not sit down until he comes here." He sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy and had beautiful eyes and was handsome. And the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him, for this is the one." Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward. Samuel then sent out and went to Ramah. I'll also be reading from the book of Ephesians, chapter 5, verses 8 through 14. That is once again the book of Ephesians, chapter 5, verses 8 through 14. "For once you were in darkness, but now in the Lord you are light. Walk as children of the light. For the fruit of the light is found in all that is good and right and true. Try to find out what is pleasing to the Lord. Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness. Rather, expose them. For it is shameful to even mention what people do secretly. But everything exposed by the light becomes visible. For everything that becomes visible is light. Therefore, it says, 'Sleeper, awake, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you.'"
Our gospel reading this morning comes from the Gospel according to John, chapter 9, verses 1 through 41. As Jesus walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's work might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." I don't know what it is about this platform, but everyone who steps up here starts coughing. Then, when Jesus had said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva and spread the mud in the man's eyes, saying to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. Then he went and washed and came back able to see. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, Isn't this the man who used to sit and beg?" Some were saying, "It's him." Others were saying, "No, but it's somebody like him." But he kept saying, "No, it's me." And they kept asking him, "How are your eyes opened?" He answered, "This man Jesus made mud, put it in my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' Then I went, and I washed, and I received my sight." Then they said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "I don't know." They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also began to ask him how he received his sight. He said to them, "He put mud on my eyes, then I washed, and now I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not observe the Sabbath." Others said, "How could a man who is a sinner perform such signs?" And they were divided. So again they said to the blind man, "What do you say about him? It was your eyes he opened." He replied, "He's a prophet." The Jews did not believe that he had been born blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? Then how does he see?" His parents answered, "We know this is our son and that he was born blind, but we don't know how it is now that he sees. Nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said this because they were already afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, "He's of age. Ask him." So for a second time they called the man who had been born blind, and they said to him, "Give glory to God, because we know this man is a sinner." He answered, "I don't know whether he's a sinner. One thing I do know is that I was blind, now I see." They answered him, "What did he do? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I told you already, and you would not listen. Why? Do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" Then they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciple? But we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses. But as for this man, we don't know where he comes from." Then he answered, "Here's the astonishing thing. You don't know where he comes from? Yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but he does listen to one who worships and obeys his will. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of somebody born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." They answered him, "You were born entirely in sins, and you are trying to teach us?" And they drove him out. Jesus heard that they had driven him out, and when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir? Tell me, so that I may believe in him." Jesus said, "You have seen him. The one speaking to you is he." He said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped him. Jesus said, "I came into the world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees who were with him heard this and said to him, "Surely we are not blind, are we?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would not have sin. But now you say, 'We see,' so your sin remains." And these for us today are the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. This is a long story. Lately, Tim, you would agree, the lectionary has given us the entire chapters to read. And this particular story has a lot of moving parts and several different scenes. So let's move quickly scene by scene, since each has a different audience and each a different emphasis. So in chapter 8, just prior to John chapter 9, Jesus had been teaching in the temple courts. And in a series of back and forth with the teachers of the law, Jesus was being challenged on the validity of his testimony. He was speaking of who he was, and obviously the religious leaders were taking him to task. They were claiming authority. Jesus was claiming a higher authority. And they attempted to discredit Jesus, but in doing so, Jesus discredited them. And finally, Jesus makes a claim like the claim that he was divine, and they prepared to stone him, so Jesus just slips away from the crowd. Then we get to chapter 9. Jesus and his guys are walking along the road, and the disciples asks him a pretty fair, innocent question. We have to remember what had just happened in chapter 8, and my guess is that the disciples were trying to sort out the teaching of the teachers of the law from the teachings of Jesus. Now, it had long been held in Jewish custom that physical deformities were punishment for sin. More specifically, being born with physical deformities was punishment for sin committed before birth, which means most likely it was sins of the expectant mother. And the disciples, they're merely asking for clarification. What typically catches our eye is not what Jesus said, but what Jesus did. What did he do? He leaned over, spit in the dirt, made mud, and put it in the eyes of the blind man. Looking at it from our vantage point, this is weird. In light of the passage that Jesus was wanting to, in light of the message Jesus was wanting to give his disciples, it actually makes sense. And this is why. He had just, in chapter 8, told the teachers of the law that he, Jesus, was the great I am, claiming to be one with God. Then he encounters a blind man. Now, if you remember, when Jesus launched his ministry, at least as recorded in the Gospel of Luke, he goes into the synagogue and reads from the scroll a portion of Isaiah, which specifically says, "He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind." This was part of Jesus reinforcing to his disciples that he, Jesus, was the Messiah. I think we're okay with that part. We get hung up on the mud. What's the deal with the mud? That's the weird thing. So, taking water and adding it to clay and kneading it was one of the violations of 39 classes of work that was prohibited on the Sabbath. So Jesus' actions, taking water and mixing it with clay and kneading it, even if it's just between your finger and your thumb, that's a violation of Sabbath laws. He was directly confronting the teachers of the law. Furthermore, what does Jesus do after he puts mud into the man's eyes? He sends him to go wash at the waters of Siloam. Have you ever wondered why? Why is this detail there? And as I tell many of my college students on campus, when you see a detail that's very specific and typically seems really out of place or odd, there's a reason. It's there. So the reason is this. This event happens on the last day, or the 8th day of the Feast of Tabernacles, which is one of the 3 pilgrimage feasts to Jerusalem. On the first 7 days of the feast, there's a huge public ritual where temple priests draw water from this particular pool and carry it to the temple. And they pour it at the base of the altar as an elaborate ceremony highlighting the importance of priests and the temple. And that priests and the temple are the source of light and healing. But on the 8th day, Jesus sends the man to the pool, and he is healed. No priests, no ritual, no temple, but it demonstrates that Jesus is the source of light and healing. Why? Because he is the living temple of God. So then we have the next scene. The man is healed, and this confuses his neighbors because he has always been a beggar, and now he's not a beggar. This scene involves the teachers of the law and the man who was healed. They take the poor man to task for the miracle that he received because it violates all sorts of norms that they were elaborately protecting. And in this culture, they had also engaged in an honor challenge. If you've heard me describe an honor challenge before, it's something like this. The teachers of the law, who are in a position of high honor in the culture, confronted this beggar who's in a position of low honor, and the teachers of the law obviously come in a position of superiority. Their goal was to make him look bad so that they would look good. And in doing so, they collect more honor and therefore have a higher position of respect in the culture. Their investigation, this honor challenge, was a way of gathering more honor. The problem is the guy didn't play by the rules. He didn't answer the questions the way they expected. And the more the guy answered honestly, the more the teachers put themselves in a position of shame. And the harder they pushed, the more honor they were losing, because their answers were insufficient to explain what had happened. And so they had to double down that the man was wrong. And then they had to question his reality, because the further this went, the more shame they were bringing on themselves. To save face, they were forced to do the only thing they could: declare him a liar and toss him out of the community. That was the only option for them to save face. Then we go to scene number 3. And scene number 3, again, it's Jesus and his disciples, but the action is between the blind man and Jesus in the presence of some of the Pharisees. Jesus clearly identifies himself to the man, and in doing so, there's a degree to which he restores the honor that had just been taken in the previous honor challenge. And he does this publicly so that the man's public standing gets restored. So then the Pharisees turn again, and they're engaging in another honor contest, this time with Jesus, and again they lose. But remember, who's the audience? The disciples. Jesus wants his guys to really understand not just who he was, but what the good news is. The gospel was birthed out of Judaism, but the way it was lived, Judaism wasn't the gospel. The gospel was bigger and more inclusive and much more relational. And note, Jesus came to heal the blind. And who were the true blind? His very own people. He didn't come to discredit them. He came to heal them, and they rejected healing. Okay, fast forward to us. Because what good is this sermon if we don't have a practical application? If we are to take the posture of the disciples, we need to allow Jesus to continue to show us that he is the Messiah. And we need to let him, through his Holy Spirit, show us the glory of the Father. And in theory, I think everybody would say amen. Or if we were conducting a business meeting, somebody would make a motion, somebody would second, and all would say aye. Yes, we affirm Jesus is the Messiah and will show us the glory of the Father. Next agenda item, please. The reality is that we struggle with letting Jesus be the Messiah because we get distracted by the same things that distracted the Pharisees. How easily we get distracted because we fall in the trap of defining how it is that God should work, and we limit our focus to that. And to be honest, we get very easily distracted because we also fall into the trap, which the Pharisees were very much not just guarding theology, they were also very much guarding culture. And part of the culture that they were trying to protect was keeping a way of life uncompromised and pure for the community. I think this is one of the places where we have a tendency as Christians on the big scale, we have a tendency to get distracted because we expend a lot of energy on trying to protect a way of life at the expense of pursuing the dreams of the Messiah. During the COVID era, the church, especially in California, spent a ton of energy and a boatload of money in legal challenges to protect a way of life. That's just sort of reality from out of our recent past. In light of our current conflict in the Middle East with Iran, we, the American church, because interestingly enough, I'm not seeing what I'm about to describe coming out of social media from other parts of the globe. This is primarily social media coming out of the United States, is a hyper projection of speculative interpretations of John's last letter. Basically, this thing that just happened in Iran, this correlates with the book of Revelation, chapter such and such, verse such and such. I personally believe that it's a misreading and a misunderstanding of John's apocalypse. That's a different story. But the point is, the social media hype isn't about what God is doing in our communities. It is this focus on foreign events and what does it mean for me and my culture. And we're also in a political cycle. And every time we head into an election, what is the warning that your pastor gives you? Both political parties are trying to co-opt protecting religious culture as a way to hijack the church for political power. And I warn everybody every time, neither political party is really interested in protecting religious culture. They are farming for votes because they want to stay in power. I think what is really discouraging to me at this particular moment in the attempts to hijack the church is reports of some in military circles, and I do have to put the disclaimer, this is not all in military circles, and it is not top-ranking military officials, but there are some low-leading military officials who are telling their troops that what we are doing is God's end-time holy war as described in the book of Revelation. I think this is a distraction from what the church is supposed to be. If we get back to this message, what is it that the church is supposed to see? What was it that Jesus wanted the disciples to see in the midst of all of these honor challenges and the back and the forth? He wanted them to see who Jesus was. And to follow Jesus and do what Jesus did. Even today, through the Holy Spirit and a humble, open-hearted church consecrated to Him, we can do what Jesus claimed in Luke because that has never stopped. Preach the good news. Oh wait, I stopped too early. Preach the good news to the poor. Proclaim freedom for the prisoner. preach recovery of sight for the blind, release the oppressed, and proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. We need to see what Jesus is doing in our community and cooperate. We need to see what Jesus is doing in our local church and cooperate. Which segues really well into something that I wanted to bring before the church body, because God is doing something and has been doing something in the last probably 6, 8, maybe 10 weeks that definitely was not on pastor's radar. It's not one of those things that we have been strategically planning for, but we as a board discussed yesterday, this is what our reality is. Jesus has said, hey, I'm doing a new thing. And now we're going, okay, we need to get on board. They're not here this morning, but if you have been here over the last few months, you've seen that we have had a handful, if they all come on the same Sunday, 8 in total, little girls between 4 and 10 who are coming with family members. Some are parents, some are neighbors, some are grandparents. But suddenly, after years of not having kids around, we have this whole group of little girls. And I think Jesus is saying, okay, it's time. So we are preparing to move forward in doing what Jesus is doing. Now, we recognize we have models out of our past that we could draw on. And Kurt and Rochelle, if you are watching, I am not signing you up to resurrect caravans at the moment. That's not the direction we're going at this particular juncture. So you can breathe easy. But we did have a discussion in our particular situation right now. What are we capable of doing? And we are looking to roll things out over the next couple months. But it's going to take all of us. If I can co-opt a phrase, I'm really going to take it out of context from political theater. It takes a village, and it is going to take all of us to play a role if we are now going to be serious about our opportunity to shepherd these 8 young ladies into mighty women of God. But I'm not going to put it on any one particular person because that leads to burnout, and burnout isn't good. So what I'm asking you to pray about, and this week all I'm asking you to do is pray. And if you commit to pray, please pray. Don't say, Pastor, I will pray about this, when you're really saying, Pastor, don't ask me and get me off your back. If you tell me you're going to pray about it, please pray about it. All I am asking at this point is for folks who are willing to commit to 1 week a month, either during the Sunday school hour or during the sermon portion of church. We are working on creating a broader structure, a comprehensive, cohesive structure on what kids ministry is going to look like. We've had discussion. I think we had a really good discussion at our board meeting yesterday on let's be holistic. What is our overall goal for children's ministry? What do we think the role the church plays? This is a step beyond let's entertain them during the sermon. It is also a bit more let's try to throw everything in at once. We recognize that there's a lot of components. What I'm trying to say is that we're planning things out. We have some existing volunteers that we hope to fold in, but we can't expect, I'll be very blunt, we can't expect Emily to do everything. That is not fair for Emily. It is also not fair for us. So I'm going to be asking some of you to step up in the next few weeks as we make these plans. Nothing is launching immediately. But while we're on the subject of kids, I do want to mention this right now. In a couple weeks, we're going to have missionaries who are going to be with us for breakfast. I would encourage those of you who are bringing little ones, bring them to that breakfast. let them also hear the missionary stories. Let them also ask questions of the missionaries. Let breakfasts and meeting the missionaries be part of their experience of what it means to be part of faith community. I don't know what this is going to look like in the end. I don't. And if I'm going to be absolutely honest, this is outside your pastor's wheelhouse. I managed for most of my career to avoid children's ministry because I'm not good at it. And Jesus has a way of making me laugh. So he is bringing us ministry that I feel very not equipped for, which is good because then God can say, see what I did? And all y'all need to do is just be willing to follow God's lead. And when we do so, we bring glory to the Father.